Hi, good day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. And firstly, before we get started, I'd just like to welcome everyone to 2023 season's tidings, and I hope everyone had a good holiday break. My name is Alex. I'm Leaders National Trainer. I'll be doing the webinar today, specifically on the Ubiquiti VPN setups that we're going to be reviewing. Really excited to be talking about Ubiquiti as always. Again, similar to the webinars we've done in the past, it's going to be 30 minutes. We might run a little bit long on this one, but we'll see how we progress through it. Questions are, as always, most welcome, although I'm sure we have a lot of very smart people in the audience here today. So if you have any questions that I can't answer, I'll be sure to answer those directly afterwards. I'll just respond via email. We are going to do a Q&A session afterwards as well, if time allows. And the main purpose of today's webinar, obviously, is to look at the different types of VPN setups. That being said, we're not going to be comparing the VPN protocols in depth as much, but instead we're going to be focusing on how these protocols are implemented on Ubiquiti. And depending on your feedback, we may also do a separate webinar in future where we show firewall configuration and how that ties into VPN setup, depending on your feedback. So on that note, in 2023, we want to do things slightly different. Instead of just talking about products and pushing the agendas that we feel most prevalent, we actually want to ask that you guys give us feedback as well. So during the course of this webinar today, we ask that you please add any topics or suggestions or anything you want us to cover during the course of the year. If there's a couple of good ones, we'll turn that into a full webinar, and we highly encourage you guys to keep the dialogue open on that, and we'll try to do more topics that are very related to what you guys are doing. So please feel free to list anything you think we can improve on or anything you would like to see. We'd love to get your feedback and implement that in the future. So that being said, we can get straight into it. I'm not going to bore you guys with a sales pitch on what VPNs are. I think most of you already have a fairly fundamental understanding of what a VPN is. I'm just going to give you the highlights of what a VPN is, and then we're going to get straight into the VPN setups on the Ubiquiti product. And all of the setups we're going to see today have been they're recorded, but they have been done live, so they've done here in our labs. So we'll actually show you the setup. The VPNs that we're setting up are predominantly set up on the UDMs as well as the UDRs. And that's primarily what we're going to be focusing on today. So in a nutshell, VPNs offer a fair amount of benefits. I think most of these you would understand already. The first big benefit, obviously, is that you can securely access and share resources, and you can do that between multiple branches as well if you want. You can give access to network resources from remote locations. You can do stuff like moderate user activity and access. You can impose network specific and traffic controls, etc., and policies, etc., to kind of enforce how users interact with your network, even though they are not within your office environment. And of course, one of the other benefits of this is security as well, which allows us to mask IP addresses when accessing the internet. And of course, the biggest benefit is that the traffic is encrypted, meaning it's secure and it's more difficult to identify the source from. So I think a lot of you would have had interactions with VPNs, at least on a very basic level, even from your mobile device or something like that, where you would be accessing content in different regions to get past geo-blocking and stuff like that. We're going to look at how that's implemented in Ubiquiti. We're also going to look at how it works with site-to-site VPNs, how teleport works, etc. So the first one we're going to be looking at today is teleport. So the teleport is done slightly differently to the rest of the Ubiquiti VPN setups. So teleport basically allows clients to remotely connect to a network that is hosted on your unified device or unified gateway, and they connect via the Wi-Fi Man app. So Wi-Fi Man is an application, you install it on your Android device or your iOS device, and it even supports Mac OS currently as well. The only thing it doesn't support, and it leaves a bit of a gap, is that it doesn't support Windows currently. I'll give you a workaround for that in the setup as well, and we can see how we can kind of get past that. But with Wi-Fi Man and Teleport, you can remotely access your local network resources, like your connected network storage, or if you want to access a PC on your local network, even though you are in Spain or somewhere else, it can absolutely be done via the Teleport application. So Teleport essentially uses WireGuard as its backbone technology. Some of you would know WireGuard already. It's a very modern and secure and reliable connection method. The best part about this is it requires zero configuration. So Teleport is extremely easy. I'll show you guys how to set this up. It is really, really straightforward. It can be done within a matter of a couple of minutes. This is technically, according to Ubiquiti, the best VPN solution that Ubiquiti has right now. But as you said before, no Windows support, so we need something to also provide VPN connectivity to Windows devices. For that, we have VPN server mode. So depending on the gateway or device that you use, you can also enable this VPN server mode. It's quite similar to Teleport, but in VPN server mode, the clients would also similarly connect to your unified device as the gateway, but there's a little bit more setup that needs to go in this. In the UDM and USG, you would go set it up as a server, and on the client side, you would actually have to go configure this as well. The benefit here is that it uses L2TP, which means it works on virtually any operating system, most of them natively. So you can run this from Windows, Mac OS. You can get clients for your Android devices. I think Android and iOS even support this natively at this point, if I'm not mistaken. So really, it works extremely well, and it's widely compatible. So we only recommend setting up a VPN server or this device in VPN server mode if you need to connect remote clients that cannot use the Wi-Fi Man mobile app. And the reason for that is L2TP, it is secure, but it is not the securest protocol out of the VPN protocols. More modern protocols like WireGuard, etc., and the cryptography that's implemented with that is more secure. And the implementation of that tends to be faster as well. So really, this is more for corporate networks where you need to have access to a myriad of different devices, different client devices, connecting via L2TP. And the benefit here is that obviously the IP addresses get masked, but the traffic isn't fully encrypted, and that does allow potentially someone to intercept or interact with the traffic. There's also concerns about the NSA having interacted with the L2TP protocol and security breaches that have occurred as a result of that. So as a way to get past this, Ubiquiti have also recently implemented WireGuard as a VPN server option in the interface, which we'll see shortly. So really, the main thing to take away here is that VPN server mode turns the UDM or the USG into the gateway, and all of your client devices connect up to this directly as well, but there is configuration required on both the USG side or the UDM side and the client side, whereas Teleport's pretty much just one click. Another common and very prevalent deployment type that we see is site-to-site VPNs. And the idea behind a site-to-site VPN is that you would connect multiple offices together. So take, for example, Leader. We have our head office here in Adelaide, where it's scorching today, by the way, but our branches are throughout the country. So for our deployment, what we'd be making use of is site-to-site VPNs. So a site-to-site VPN ensures that users in different branches can access resources regardless of where they are hosted. So to a user on our network, it would appear transparent. They can access, for example, our storage repositories or something like that. And to them, it just seems like it's a local network connection. So site-to-site VPNs are not meant for home or remote users. Instead, it's meant to link together two different branches or two different offices or something like that. Site-to-site VPNs are more secure as they use IPsec VPN or OpenVPN, depending on your preference, and you can actually select that during the setup as well. And through this, traffic is fully encrypted, so it's an ideal business tool. The next mode that you have in the interface is the VPN client mode. So a very common problem that is faced by networks and some client devices is that they do not support VPN functionality natively, but we still want to secure them. And what I mean by that is we often find that stuff like laptops and cell phones, etc., are very easy to connect up with a VPN because they just support that natively, or they have an app that runs on it. But what about your TVs and IoT devices, etc.? They can't run the application natively because they weren't built for that. So this is where VPN client functionality comes in handy. So essentially, this turns your UDM or your UDR or something similar into a VPN client, and all of the connected devices that are connecting to this UDM or UDR will automatically use that VPN that is set up to an external provider. And through this, you would use a third-party provider, somebody like NordVPN or ExpressVPN, or you pick your choice from that. There's tons of different VPNs to use, but essentially, your UDM establishes a connection to the external provider. The external provider obviously connects through to the internet, and then your UDM provides local connectivity to your local devices. And of course, all of the traffic then is connected via VPN. This can be quite handy if you want to do or get past region blocking. And home use, that would be a very handy scenario. If you are worried about security concerns of your IoT devices, etc., as well, this could be a very good way to encrypt that traffic and make sure that no one has public access to that information. As a very quick summary of all of this, we can compare and contrast these. You guys can read this through after the video has been concluded. But essentially, Teleport is there to offer secure, fast, and user-friendly connectivity, but it only works on clients that support it. In other words, iOS, Android, or macOS. It's to be used with home use or small businesses primarily, and basically it only requires basic server setup. You don't really need to configure the clients, it's just done via one-click links. In VPN server mode with L2CP, it's secure but not fully encrypted. The big benefit there is that it supports almost all devices natively. We're going to show you how to set that up on Windows and Mac OS as well. Android and iOS is just as easy. The only downside to this is that it does require server and client setup. And the recommendation here is to use Ubiquiti's new implementation of WireGuard instead, as it offers more security. For site-to-site, to use to link two sites together, like I already said, it's very secure, it's encrypted. The only things to take note of is that you do require that both sites are set up, that they share the same settings, they share the same keys, and they both have external IP addresses. And we're going to talk about external IP addresses in a second as well. So it basically forms a bridge between the sites and becomes transparent to the users. They just use it as they normally would. And then VPN client mode, all the traffic goes to a third-party VPN. Like I said, it requires a server side to be set up. There's no configuration needed on the end client devices. Everything that is connected to the UDM is just automatically connected through to that third-party VPN natively. So very easy to set it up that way. And what we're going to do now is we're going to first look at Teleport setup. This is going to go quite fast, so I'm going to pause the video at a couple of intervals so we can discuss some of the things that are happening. I'm using my little UDR that I have set up at home as it's a real-world scenario. I'm literally just going into settings and then Teleport. You'll see my link is pretty much blank at this point. It shows you the different supported applications. So it says macOS, iOS, Android, etc. And then through this, I can essentially go create a new link. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my invitation history. You can see that I've already invited some of my other devices. And to generate an invite is extremely easy. I literally just click generate new link. I can copy that link and I can send this off to a user. They open the link, and as soon as they've opened it, it will change from pending to accepted. And once it's been accepted, that user has access to my network. And I'll show you how it's done from the client side in a sec, but extremely, extremely easy. As you would have seen as well, you can revoke that acceptance after the fact. So if you don't want to have someone accessing your network after they've left the company, or someone that's left your home or something like that, then you can revoke that access, or device has been stolen. That's a better use case. So from the client side, if I want to accept this, it's extremely straightforward. So this is just a expired link. You don't have to worry about the security on that one, but essentially I've just clicked on that. It's something I've received by email. I click on the link, it opens up the Wi-Fi Man app natively. I click connect, and then I literally just press on and it's instantly connected. If you blink, you'll miss it. It's such an easy setup from the client side. They don't have to do anything. It will even prompt them if they haven't installed the Wi-Fi Man app to install that on your device. So super easy, really, really fast. And through that, I've literally just connected to my home network. Really impressive. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is our VPN server setup. Again, the primary use case here is to connect clients that cannot use the Wi-Fi Man app. So we're talking about Windows devices, etc. That's essentially what we're looking at. I said before that I'll give you a pro tip on how to use teleport with Windows. And the best recommendation I can do here is I do this a lot for travel, is I have the Wi-Fi Man app set up on my phone. I connect via the VPN, and then as soon as I'm connected via VPN, I just enable a hotspot mode on my mobile device, and then I can connect with my Windows devices to that hotspot, meaning all the traffic connected through that hotspot is secured to my network, just as a pro tip. So again, let's see how we're going to set this up. To set this up, I'm literally just going to settings, and then teleport and VPN as the setting on the left-hand side there. Previously, we just looked at the teleport option. Instead, what we're going to be looking at now is VPN server setup. So VPN server setup, you can either click create a new VPN server, or like I've done already, we have one set up there. And as you'll see, there's now two VPN protocols to select from, WireGuard and L2TP. What we can do first is we just need to set up a network name. Doesn't matter really what it is. And this would be pre-populated with a strong pre-shared key. Please, for the love of money, don't make it like my extremely strong encrypted key here, where it's just test123. It's a really bad idea. This key needs to be strong, and it by default gives you an extremely strong key as well. The one thing that is important to note here is I don't have external IP addresses set up, and what you'll see as my server address here should in fact be my external IP address. So this is called double natting. I'll talk about that in a sec. We're going to look at that through the problems that we look at as well. But essentially it means that there is another gateway in front of this gateway. So I'm getting a local address, whereas in the real world, what you should be seeing there is your own external address. So this is something that you will probably need to arrange with your internet service provider. And that's the one thing with a lot of the VPN setups, is that you must have a public IP address. It's recommended to have a static public IP address in order to avoid reconfiguring your clients when the IP address changes. Or alternatively, you can also use a dynamic DNS to update the IP and avoid reconfiguring the clients when the IP address updates. But that, again, is something you would have to implement on your own and set up with your internet service provider. For the most part, we recommend setting up a static external IP address, which makes sure that your gateway is always reachable on the internet. So in this instance, as soon as I see a local address, I can already know that I'm going to have problems here. But for our example, we're just going to proceed with that. So I can change the server address as well. It's just populating with the default IP address that I have set up. And then we have two types of user authentication as well. I can either create a basic user like I'm doing here, and this is literally just a username and password, or I can do a full Radius setup. So if I had a Radius profile and access control list set up, I can implement that here as well, so that only specific users get access to our VPN deployment. The next thing I want to do is, so you'll see here, I have an option to choose between auto and manual mode. Manual is recommended. The next thing I can do is I can select from the access lists, and now I can control which gateway or subnet this will be connected to natively. So if a user connects through to our VPN, this is the subnet that they will be put in automatically. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I can also point my UDM or something to, or my VPN to a internal name server, so a DNS server internally. In this case, I can point it to my local UDM, or I can point it to an external provider as well. And then the one thing that is important here is the option that says requires strong authentication. That should be ticked. And essentially that's forcing it into MSCHAP v2. Okay, and from the server side, that's pretty much it. It's extremely straightforward. It's really easy to set up. And from the client side, it's just as easy. From the client side, this is in Windows. I've literally just gone to settings and then network and internet. You say add a VPN. I can give my connection a name. I can say it's a leader VPN. I'm pointing this, the server address that I'm adding in there should actually be my external IP address. That's the external IP address of the gateway that I'm trying to connect to. I select my VPN type. So I would say it's a L2TP IPsec appreciate key VPN. The appreciate key that I created in the previous setup, essentially when I created the user and when I created that test123 appreciate key, those are the keys that we need to enter here. So the key that I'm going to enter here would be test123, and then obviously the username and password for the specific user that I've set up as well. So I can type in appreciate key, that's test123, and then I say what my type of authentication is. It's either certificate based or it's username and password based. In this instance, I can just say save, and then I can go and connect. And theoretically speaking, if my host was reachable, it would now go through and connect to this client to that VPN server. It's similarly as easy on Mac. Literally just go to network, you go to VPN, you add a new VPN configuration. I can change the configuration. I can change the name of it, so I can make this leader VPN. I can have multiple configurations of a VPN as well. Again, I'm pointing this to a local address, but in the real world, it should be to a static external address. I would go create the account name, the password, and similar to before, I would use that appreciate key, that PSK, and just paste it in here, which again is test123, but in the real world should be a strong, secure password. Once that's done, I can go click create. And that's it. Setup is complete. Theoretically speaking, my device now has access to that VPN server. So extremely easy to do. And again, this is natively supported in the operating system. I didn't have to install anything to do this. The recommendation from Ubiquiti is to use the native clients as much as possible. For site-to-site VPNs, similar to what we've done before, we're just going to the bottom and clicking on site-to-site VPN. In this instance, I've got a UDM and a UDR set up. So the UDM would be head office. I've just named this head office. The protocol that I'm going to be using here is manual IPsec. You can choose between manual IPsec and OpenVPN as well, depending on what your preference is. We're just going to show manual IPsec today. And just to showcase what the setup is, to set up OpenVPN, it's a little bit more complex, but Ubiquiti has an awesome guide on how to do that. It's available. You can literally just type in OpenVPN setup Ubiquiti, and then you can type in the UDM or whatever you're after, and it should show you a full guide on how to do that. It's extremely easy. Important here, it says Unified Gateway IP, and mine just shows WAN 1. This would again indicate that there's a problem. The reason this is just showing WAN 1 and not an IP address or not an external IP address is because I don't have anything connected to the WAN port of my UDM that I'm testing on. So in the real world, again, you should be seeing a static external IP address indicated in that field. Or alternatively, if you see a local address indicated in this field, it could also be that you've just set up port forwarding on your upstream router, which we'll talk about in a second as well. It'll also tell you that you're using DHCP, which is not recommended for a site-to-site VPN, and they tell you to go change your internet settings. So I've just given this a random IP address, but in the real world, it should be your static external IP address. And now I can choose which subnets I want to share. So this is the subnet that I'm sharing to my remote clients. And when I'm sharing this, I'm sharing the entire subnet. I'm not just sharing a specific address. I'm not going 192.168.50.1. Instead, I'm sharing the entire subnet, so 0.24 in this instance. And essentially I can go add this in, and I can add a range of subnets as well. So I don't have to do just one subnet, I can do multiple subnets and add an entire range of subnets as well. I can also batch add this to make it easier. So just an important note on that. So subnets cannot be the same, and you have to plan this carefully. So if you have a subnet that is shared on this UDM, it cannot be shared on the other device, in this case a UDR as well. So you would share a different subnet with this device. So whatever you're entering here needs to be unique. So when we're entering the subnets, it needs to be unique, whereas the rest of the settings need to be identical. So the appreciate key we saw earlier when I typed in the appreciate key, when I went past the appreciate key, let's see if I can go back a bit. So that appreciate key that we see at the top there, that one, that needs to be shared across both sites as well. It needs to be identical on both sides, whereas the subnets need to be unique on both sides. I've added both those subnets in, and in the remote IP address field that I'm seeing here, essentially I would be saying where I'm establishing this connection to. So similarly, this would be an external address. So this is the UDM or UDR that I am connecting to. Cannot be blank, it has to be entered. So in this one, I've just given it a fictitious IP address again, and I'm emulating that this is a static external address. When it comes to advanced settings on this, best practice, just leave it on auto, go add a VPN network, and that's done. Now what I need to do is I need to go over to the remote side. So this is the UDR that I'm talking about, and I need to do the same thing. So I've connected to my UDR. I'm going to go site-to-site VPN. Same thing. I'm going to type in, this is the remote office link, for example. I'm going to make sure it's the same protocol. I'm going to make sure that the appreciate key is the same, the PSK is the same. This one does have a WAN port connected, so showing the IP address of that WAN port. In the real world, again, it should be your external address, or it can be an internal one if port forwarding is set up. So I'm going to type in the subnets here, and you'll see I make a critical mistake where I add .50, but .50 is already taken up, so I can't do that. I need to make sure this subnet is unique. It becomes important to properly plan your subnets in this instance. So again, adding the entire subnet in, I'm saying that I just want them to have access to this specific subnet. And now I need to point this UDR to the UDM that I've already set up. So I'm entering the remote IP address and I'm pointing it to that UDM. Once I've added that in, it's essentially established a connection. So there's tons of places for little errors to creep in on this, and we'll look at the different errors that we can run into directly after this as well. But again, super straightforward. With this, there's no client-side setup, so the client, it appears transparent. And then the last mode that we have here is VPN client setup. So I've just created a little sandbox VPN account. You'll see here that the VPN type is only VPN. So you have to use an external provider that supports open VPN connectivity. Most of the external VPN providers like NordVPN, etc., all supports open VPN. It's a fairly commonplace standard. So in this instance, it's a NordVPN sandbox account, and I'm literally just going to go NordVPN, and I am going to enter the username and password that I get off of my NordVPN account. So sandbox account, so don't worry about the security of this. I can type that in, so that's my username, and then I'm going to go copy the password. And then the one thing that is a non-negotiable is you have to upload the configuration file. So the configuration file comes from the provider, and most of your providers would have this already. With NordVPN, it is extremely easy to access it. You can literally just type in OpenVPN configuration files, NordVPN, and it gives us an entire list of all the VPNs. You'll see all of them have different prefixes. So this one is AL18. That's to point it to a specific NordVPN server. As I scroll down, you'll see there's AU, etc. as well. So you can point it to a specific server if you wish. So in this instance, I need to go upload this. I've downloaded this file. I go upload this, and I'm uploading this into my UDR. It's going to save. It's going to disconnect for a second because I'm connecting to this UDR remotely, and it takes a while for Ubiquiti to update the DNS records. And I'm going to skip ahead slightly here, so you'll see it loses connectivity there. And then as soon as I refresh, it comes back online. And then as soon as I go back into settings and teleport, you should see that my NordVPN OpenVPN client is connected. It shows uptime 44 seconds. And essentially all of my connecting client devices would now be on that specific VPN. It's connected through to NordVPN. So really, really simple to set that up. So let's take a look at some of the common problems that we face. So this applies to everything except teleport. Teleport is very simple to set up. So one of the common problems that we see is that you don't have a public IP address, or you have double NATing. So you have a gateway in front of your Ubiquiti device, and the gateway is only handing out local addresses. So if you see an IP address in the ranges that we show on screen, it typically means it's a local one, and it typically means that there's another gateway in front of it already. So the easiest solution to get past this is just set the upstream router to bridge mode. In bridge mode, it should pass this through. It should pass that external IP address through to your Ubiquiti device, which means it will be remotely accessible. So there's no other real way to get past it except for doing port forwarding, and specifically you need to do port forwarding on the upstream router, and that will be on UDP port 500 and port 4500. Those will need to be forwarded in order to make this gateway reachable, in order to have that server functionality be available to your client devices. So another common problem that we face is that the ports are blocked. So third-party routers or firewalls can by default block UDP 500 and 4500. So those are the ports that we require to be open to have VPN server functionality. So check if there's any firewalls or additional routers in your network that may be blocking these ports. It could also be on the ISP side of things. So they could be blocking those ports natively. Please have a chat to your ISP if that is the case. And then one of the last things to check as well is confirm that the traffic is not being forwarded to another device due to your firewall rules. So this is on the actual USG or UDM. You can set up rules to dictate how the traffic is handled once it hits the UDM or USG. Make sure that it's not forwarding all of the traffic to a specific device. Run through your firewall rules to make sure that your VPN connectivity is set up correctly. Some of the other common problems that we face is authentication failures. So authentication typically indicates two things. It's either a mismatched pre-shared key, in other words, that VPN key that we set up, that test123, or it's mismatched user credentials. So highly recommend checking both of those. Ensure that the client device supports MS-CHAP version 2. If it's an older device, it might not actually support that. And when we enable strong authentication, that is essentially what we ticked there. And then ensure that the client is set to L2TP. A lot of the times the client, if it's set to automatic mode, it might not be selecting the correct VPN type, and that would cause authentication errors as well. So another problem that we face is if it cannot establish an L2TP connection. So if it's just flat out refusing to establish a connection, the authentication credentials are correct, but the connection is just refusing, then typically I would recommend starting off with trying a different operating system or a different client. Check for new OS updates. So that is less frequent, but we have seen that in the past as well, where the operating system has caused issues. And then one thing to note here is that most Android clients require weak ciphers. That's a setting in the setup, in the server setup, that you need to tick. So if you have a lot of Android clients connecting to your VPN, depending on the age of those devices, they might need to have weak cipher and support enabled. And it's not just old devices as well, it can be some of the more modern devices. Okay. And then one of the other issues that we see is that the client routes over the VPN, but traffic is not flowing the way it's intended to. The traffic is prohibited. Stuff to check here is to check the traffic or firewall rules, similar to what we've done before. One thing to take note of as well is that the client device can also have a firewall set up, and that firewall could also be dropping all of the local traffic. So check that as a point of failure as well. And then something that I've picked up a lot is when people are testing if the VPN connectivity is established, they try to do a ping test from their Windows device to the VPN server. This doesn't work by default. This is something you will need to enable, and it requires firewall configuration in the Windows client device. So please take note of that. We see a lot of people getting stuck on that point when the connection is actually fully established, but it just appears to not be working because they cannot ping the remote side. And then the last connectivity problems that we see, and this is specific to site deployments, is where you have overlapping IP ranges. So this is if you didn't do your subnet planning correctly. So let's say I had 192.168.1.50 on the one side, or 50.0, let's say, on the one side, and 50.0 on the other side as well. So your client sites will always tend to favor their local IP ranges first instead of trying to reach a VPN link with the same subnet. So if I have the same subnet set up on both sides, it will always try to access the local one first, meaning that your remote one you'll establish or you'll have connectivity issues to the remote one. So it's important to make sure there's no overlap, and it's important to ensure that you've planned this out correctly for the number of sites that you have. And remember, it's for the entire IP address range, it's the entire subnet. So it's 192.168.0.1 all the way up to 255. It's not just a specific IP address. So that's pretty much it. It's a very short little video or webinar on how VPNs are set up. Please do hang around because we are going to do the Q&A and we are going to give away the UDM as well to the value of $579. So just bear with us a second. One thing that I do also highly encourage you guys to take a look at, if you haven't seen it already, Leader does offer Ubiquiti training, specifically on the indoor and outdoor wireless products. The training is listed on the on the Leader Academy website, not the Ubiquiti website, and is available for you guys to access and register to any course that you would see suitable. We do training throughout the entire country, pretty much throughout the entire year as well. If you want to see more webinars like this, or if you want to see any forthcoming webinars, we have tons of webinars available on the Leader Academy site. It's very simple. Just browse through the ones you want, register, and you can go from there. To get to the Leader Academy site, it's very simple, leaderacademy.com.au, or alternatively, you can simply go to your normal dealershop account and you can go through there.